Here he is.
Here he comes. Here comes the president.
We've seen this walk so many times, moments of history, moments of controversy, and today a seismic moment in terms of the Middle East.
Thank you very much. A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the three key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
Okay, so imagine this. You wake up one morning and the President of the United States has just bombed another country. Not a small strike, not a warning shot. We're talking about 3 major nuclear facilities in Iran. And here's the kicker. Congress had no idea it was coming. 0 heads up. Zilch. But you know who did get a warning? Foreign governments. Yeah, that's right. Other countries knew before our own lawmakers. Can you believe this? So now, here we are. November 2025. Congress is moving to remove Trump from office. Not through some slow, drawn-out process. We're talking emergency proceedings, fast-track removal. And this whole thing started because Trump decided he could just authorize military strikes without telling anyone who's supposed to have a say in whether we go to war. This is wild, right? Let me paint the full picture for you. On June 21st, Trump posts on Truth Social, just casually announces that he successfully attacked 3 Iranian nuclear sites: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Major facilities. He's celebrating it like he just won a golf tournament. Meanwhile, members of Congress are finding out the same way you and I are, through social media, through the news, not through official channels, not through the proper briefings they're supposed to get when the commander-in-chief decides to start bombing another country. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
The U.S. is preparing for possible military action inside Venezuela. CBS News has learned senior military officials presented President Trump with potential operations, including land strikes. This comes after months of attacks on alleged drug boats we've been reporting. The latest strike was on Monday. The Pentagon official says it targeted a vessel in the Caribbean and killed 4 people.
And look, this isn't about whether Iran deserved it or not. That's a whole different conversation. This is about how decisions get made, about who has the authority to make them. Because last time I checked, the Constitution has some pretty clear rules about war powers. And those rules say Congress is supposed to be involved, not kept in the dark while foreign governments get the inside scoop. So what happened next? Well, Congress did not take this well. Shockingly, they were not thrilled to learn that the president thinks he can just bypass them entirely when it comes to military action. Who would have thought, right? And we're not talking about a few angry tweets from random representatives. We're talking about formal emergency removal proceedings launched this week, November 13th and 14th, House resolutions citing unconstitutional usurpation of congressional authority. Those are fancy legal words that basically mean Trump grabbed power that wasn't his to grab. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Legal experts are saying that if Congress actually pulls this off, if they actually manage to remove or suspend Trump, the political fallout is going to be absolutely massive. We're heading into 2026 elections. The country is already divided like crazy. And now you're going to add a presidential removal to that mix. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire that's already burning down the house. But let's be real for a second. This isn't happening in a vacuum. Trump has been pushing the boundaries of executive power since day 1 of this term. And honestly, since his first term too, this is just the latest, most dramatic example. We've seen emergency declarations. We've seen executive orders that courts keep blocking. We've seen attempts to use military authority in ways that make constitutional scholars' heads spin. And each time, there's this question. How far can a president actually go before someone stops them? Well, apparently bombing Iran without congressional approval is where Congress decided to draw the line. Took them long enough, some might say, but here we are. Emergency proceedings. actual consequences, or at least the attempt at actual consequences. Because let's not pretend this is going to be simple or straightforward. The resolution from Congress doesn't mince words either. They're calling this high crimes and misdemeanors. They're saying Trump violated the separation of powers, that he created a dangerous precedent, that he risked escalating global conflicts without the checks and balances that are supposed to exist. And you know what? They're not wrong. Whether you love Trump or hate him, the idea that any president can just decide to bomb another country and tell Congress about it on social media after the fact, that should probably concern you. So that's where we're at. Trump authorized strikes on Iran back in June, didn't tell Congress, told other countries first, and now, 5 months later, Congress is fighting back. They're moving for emergency removal, and the whole country is watching to see what happens next. Because this isn't just about Trump. This is about what kind of power future presidents will have, about whether congressional war powers actually mean anything anymore, about whether we still have a system of checks and balances, or whether we've just been pretending this whole time. And yeah, the timing is wild. The 2026 elections are coming up. Public opinion is all over the place. Some people think Trump is a hero for taking action against Iran. Other people think he's a dictator who needs to be stopped. And most people are probably just confused about what's actually legal and what's not. Which, fair enough, because even the legal experts can't seem to agree. The stakes here are enormous. We're not just talking about one president's actions. We're talking about the future of presidential power in America. We're talking about whether Congress still matters, whether the Constitution still matters, whether any of the rules we learned about in school actually apply when things get real. So buckle up, because this story is about to get a whole lot messier before it gets any clearer. And what happens in the next few weeks could reshape American politics for generations. All right, so let's dive deeper into what actually happened here. Because the surface level story, Trump bombs Iran without telling Congress, that's dramatic enough. But when you start peeling back the layers, it gets even more complicated, and honestly even more concerning. First, let's talk about the timeline. June 21st, 2025. That's when Trump makes his big announcement on Truth Social. Now, for those keeping track, that's almost 5 months ago. So why are we just now, in mid-November, seeing emergency removal proceedings? Good question. And the answer tells you a lot about how slow and political this whole process is. See, Congress doesn't just wake up one day and decide to remove a president. Even with emergency proceedings, there's a process. There are debates, there are legal arguments, there are political calculations. Because removing a sitting president isn't just a legal decision, it's a political nuclear bomb. And every single member of Congress voting on this knows that their vote is going to follow them forever. So what happened in those 5 months between the strikes and now? Well, apparently there was a lot of back channel negotiating, a lot of trying to get Trump to walk back his claims, or at least acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, he should have told Congress first. But Trump being Trump, he doubled down, kept insisting he had every right to do what he did, kept saying that as commander-in-chief, he has the authority to protect American interests. And technically, he's not completely wrong. The president does have certain war powers, but those powers have limits. And most legal scholars agree that bombing another country's nuclear facilities without any congressional notification probably crosses those limits. Now let's talk about the constitutional issues, because this is where things get really interesting. The War Powers Resolution, which was passed way back in 1973, says that the president can take military action in certain emergency situations, but he's supposed to notify Congress within 48 hours. That's the rule. 48 hours. And even then, if Congress doesn't authorize the action, the military operations are supposed to stop within 60 days. Did Trump follow any of that? Nope, not even close. He announced the strikes on social media. That's not the same as formally notifying Congress. And from what congressional leaders are saying, they never got any official briefing at all. Some of them learned about it from CNN, from Twitter, from their own staff who saw the news. That's not how this is supposed to work. But here's where it gets even weirder. Multiple sources are saying that foreign governments were given advance notice. Now there's some logic to that. If you're going to bomb another country, you probably want to tell your allies so they can prepare for potential fallout. Makes sense. But when your allies know before your own Congress, that's a problem. That's a huge problem. Because it suggests that Trump cares more about international optics than he does about constitutional requirements. And look, this isn't the first time a president has pushed the boundaries of war powers. Every modern president has done it to some degree. Obama had issues with Libya. Bush had issues with Iraq, obviously. Even Clinton had issues with Kosovo. So Trump is not inventing a new problem here. But what he is doing is taking it to a new level. Because those other presidents, Even when they stretched their authority, they at least tried to bring Congress into the loop eventually. They at least pretended to care about the constitutional process. Trump apparently decided that pretending wasn't necessary anymore, and that's what has Congress so worked up. Because if they let this slide, what's to stop the next president from doing something even more extreme? What's to stop future presidents from just ignoring Congress entirely when it comes to military decisions? You're basically gutting the legislative branch's authority over war powers. And once that's gone, it's really hard to get back. Now let's talk about the emergency removal proceedings themselves, because this is not a normal impeachment process. Normal impeachment takes months, sometimes over a year. There are investigations, there are hearings, there are endless political speeches, but emergency proceedings are different. They're designed for situations where waiting would cause too much damage, where the threat is so immediate that you need to act fast. Is this really an emergency though? The strikes happened in June, it's November now. Some people are saying this is just political theater, that if it was really an emergency, Congress would have acted months ago. And yeah, there's probably some truth to that. The timing is definitely suspicious, right before the 2026 elections. Come on, you can't tell me politics isn't playing a role here. But at the same time, just because something is political doesn't mean it's not also legitimate. Trump did authorize military strikes without congressional approval. That is a fact. Whether you think it was justified or not, whether you think Iran deserved it or not, the constitutional process wasn't followed. And if Congress doesn't hold presidents accountable for that, then the Constitution is basically just a suggestion at this point. The resolution that Congress filed, House Resolution from November 13th and 14th, it doesn't hold back. They're accusing Trump of unconstitutional usurpation of congressional authority. They're saying he violated the separation of powers. They're arguing that his actions set a dangerous precedent that threatens the entire system of checks and balances. And you know what? Read the Constitution yourself. Read Article 1. Read the War Powers Resolution. Then tell me if you think Trump followed the rules. Now, here's what's probably going to happen. And I say probably because with Trump, you never really know. But based on how these things usually work, Congress is going to have a massive fight over this. Republicans are going to defend Trump. They're going to say he was protecting America, that he was being strong, that Iran is a threat, and he did what needed to be done. Democrats are going to argue that the law is the law, that the Constitution matters, that you can't just ignore congressional authority because it's inconvenient. And in the middle of all this, the American people are going to be completely divided because that's where we are as a country right now. Everything is polarized. Everything is partisan. You can't even agree on basic facts anymore, let alone on whether a president should be removed from office. But let's think about what happens if Congress actually succeeds, if they actually manage to remove or suspend Trump. Legal experts are warning that this would create absolute chaos. We're talking about a constitutional crisis on a level we haven't seen in modern American history. The country is already on edge. Political tensions are already sky high. And now you're going to remove a sitting president right before major elections. The fallout would be insane. Trump's supporters would lose their minds. They already think the system is rigged against him. They already believe there's a deep state conspiracy. If Congress removes him, that's just going to confirm everything they've been saying. You'd probably see protests, maybe worse. That's just going to confirm everything they've been saying. You'd probably see protests. The political divide in this country would become a political chasm. But if Congress doesn't act, what message does that send? It sends the message that presidents are above the law, that constitutional requirements are optional, that checks and balances are just nice ideas we talk about in civics class, but don't actually enforce in real life. And that's maybe even more dangerous in the long run. So we're stuck between two really bad options. Remove Trump and risk massive political upheaval, or let it slide and risk destroying what's left of congressional war powers. Pick your poison. And through all of this, let's not forget why this matters beyond just the politics. Trump bombed nuclear facilities in Iran. That's not a small thing. That's the kind of action that can trigger regional conflicts, that can destabilize an already volatile part of the world, that can lead to American casualties. And the decision to do that was made by one person without any real oversight or debate. Whether you trust that one person or not, that should probably concern you. Think about the ripple effects too. Iran didn't just sit quietly after getting bombed. There have been threats of retaliation. There have been increased tensions across the Middle East. Oil prices have fluctuated. Global markets have reacted. All of that economic and geopolitical fallout stems from a decision that was made unilaterally, without debate, without congressional input. And that's the core issue here. Not whether the strikes were right or wrong, but whether the process was followed. Okay, so let's break this down into simple pieces, because there's a lot of noise around this story, and I want to make sure we're all clear on what's actually happening versus what people are saying is happening. Point 1. Trump authorized military strikes on Iran without congressional approval. This happened back in June. 3 nuclear sites were hit: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. These aren't small targets. These are major facilities. And Trump announced it on Truth Social before officially notifying Congress. Some lawmakers found out from the news. Foreign governments apparently got advance notice. That's the basic fact pattern. Everything else flows from that. Point 2. Congress is now pursuing emergency removal proceedings. This is happening in November, 5 months after the strikes. They're citing unconstitutional usurpation of authority. They're saying Trump violated the separation of powers. The resolution was filed November 13th and 14th. And unlike normal impeachment, emergency proceedings are supposed to move faster. Whether they actually will move faster remains to be seen, but that's the stated goal. Point 3. This raises huge questions about presidential war powers. And honestly, this is the part that matters most beyond just Trump, because whatever precedent gets set here is going to affect every future president. If Congress lets this slide, future presidents will know they can ignore war powers requirements. If Congress successfully removes Trump, future presidents will know there are actual consequences for overstepping. Either way, we're setting a precedent that's going to matter for decades. Point 4. The political timing is incredibly suspicious. We're heading into 2026 elections. Public opinion is divided, and Congress decides now is the time to pursue removal? Come on. Obviously, there's political calculation happening here. Obviously, Democrats see an opportunity, and Republicans see a threat. That doesn't mean the underlying issue isn't real, but it does mean we should be aware that this isn't happening in some pure apolitical vacuum. So why does this story matter? Why should you care about congressional procedures and war powers and constitutional technicalities? Because this is about accountability. It's about whether rules apply to everyone or just to regular people. It's about whether the system of checks and balances that's supposed to prevent any one person from having too much power actually works. Think about it this way. If you went to your job and just decided to do something major without telling your boss, without following company policy, what would happen? You'd probably get fired, right? At minimum, you face some consequences. But when the President of the United States does it, when he authorizes military strikes without following the constitutional process, what happens? Well, that's what we're finding out right now. And the answer to that question is going to tell us a lot about where we are as a country. Are we still a nation of laws? Or are we just a nation where the most powerful person gets to do whatever they want and everyone else has to deal with it? Now let's talk about what comes next, because this story is far from over. Congress has started emergency proceedings, but that's just the beginning. There are going to be debates, there are going to be votes, there are going to be legal challenges. Trump's lawyers are definitely going to fight this. They're going to argue that he had the authority to do what he did. They're going to say that as commander-in-chief, he doesn't need congressional approval for every military action. And they might even have some legal ground to stand on, depending on how courts interpret presidential war powers. But here's the thing. Even if Trump technically had some legal authority, there's a difference between legal and right. There's a difference between what you can do and what you should do. And most people, even legal experts who might defend Trump's technical authority, agree that the way this was handled was wrong. You don't announce military strikes on social media. You don't keep Congress in the dark while telling foreign governments. That's not how a functioning democracy is supposed to work. The economic angle is worth thinking about too, because military conflicts aren't cheap. They don't just cost lives, they cost money, billions of dollars. And who controls the money? Congress. That's literally one of their main constitutional powers, the power of the purse. So when a president commits to military action without congressional input, he's potentially committing resources that Congress hasn't authorized. That's another constitutional issue on top of the war powers question. And then there's the global implications. Iran didn't just sit there and take these strikes quietly. There have been responses, there have been threats, regional tensions have increased. Other countries are watching to see how America handles this internally. And all of that happened because of a decision made by one person without any real debate or oversight. Whether you think Iran is a threat or not, whether you think the strikes were necessary or not, the process matters, because next time, it might not be Iran. It might be a country with more powerful allies. It might be a situation that spirals out of control faster than anyone expects. Let's also talk about what this means for the 2026 elections, because you better believe every candidate is going to have to take a position on this. Do you support Trump's actions? Do you support congressional removal? You can't really avoid the question. And how candidates answer is going to tell voters a lot about where they stand on executive power, on congressional authority, on checks and balances. This is going to be a defining issue. Like it or not, public opinion polls are all over the place on this. Some show majority support for Trump's decision to strike Iran. Others show majority concern about the constitutional process. A lot depends on how you phrase the question. If you ask people whether they support attacking Iranian nuclear facilities, you'll get one answer. If you ask whether they support presidents making war decisions without congressional approval, you'll get a different answer. And that's part of the problem. People's positions on this are often based more on whether they like Trump than on the actual constitutional principles involved. But here's what concerns me most, and I'm just being real with you here. We're at a point where constitutional norms don't seem to matter as much as they used to. Presidents from both parties have been pushing boundaries for years. Congress has been letting them get away with it. Courts have been inconsistent in enforcement, and the result is that we're not really sure anymore what the rules are. We have a constitution, we have laws, but if nobody actually enforces them consistently, do they really exist? This Trump situation is a test. It's a test of whether Congress still has any real power, whether constitutional requirements are actual requirements or just suggestions, whether accountability exists at the highest levels of government. And we're about to find out the answer. The historical context matters here too. Think about other times presidents have faced removal proceedings. Think about Nixon and Watergate. Think about Clinton and impeachment. Think about Trump's first impeachment back in his first term. Each of those situations tested the boundaries of presidential power and congressional authority. And each time, we learned something about how our system actually works versus how it's supposed to work on paper. This situation is arguably more serious than some of those because it involves military action. It involves potential war. It involves decisions that can cost lives, American lives and lives in other countries. When you're talking about war powers, the stakes are literally life and death. And that's why the constitutional process exists. That's why the founders wanted Congress involved. Not because they didn't trust presidents, but because they knew that decisions this important shouldn't rest with one person alone. So where does this all end up? Honestly, nobody knows for sure. Congress might successfully remove or suspend Trump. That would be historic, unprecedented in a lot of ways. Or Congress might fail. The proceedings might fall apart. Political pressures might make it impossible to get enough votes. Trump might survive this like he survived everything else. And then what? Then we have a president who knows he can ignore Congress and get away with it. And that's a scary precedent for everyone, regardless of your politics. My prediction, this is going to drag out. It's going to be messy. It's going to be partisan. And in the end, it's probably going to come down to a handful of votes from people trying to balance their constitutional duties against their political survival, just like everything else in Washington these days. But one thing's for sure, this story isn't going away. The questions it raises about presidential power, about congressional authority, about checks and balances, those are fundamental questions. And how we answer them now is going to shape American democracy for a long time to come. The broader implications extend beyond just this one incident. We're setting precedents right now that will affect how future presidents behave, how future Congresses respond, how the balance of power between branches of government actually functions in practice. And that matters whether you're Democrat or Republican, whether you love Trump or hate him, whether you think Iran deserved those strikes or not. Because at the end of the day, this is about systems, about processes, about whether we're a country governed by laws and procedures, or whether we're a country where power is the only thing that matters. And right now, we're finding out which one we really are. So stay tuned, because whatever happens next is going to be historic and, yeah, probably chaotic. The next few weeks are going to be absolutely wild. Congressional debates are going to get heated. Legal arguments are going to fly. Public protests are probably going to happen. And through it all, we're going to learn something important about American democracy in 2025. My advice? Pay attention. Read beyond the headlines. Understand the constitutional issues at play here, because this matters. This really matters. And the outcome is going to affect all of us for years to come. Buckle up. It's going to be one hell of a ride.